evening, dear viewer. Good evening. Welcome to today's episode of Transforming Conversations. I'll be joined by Lebogang Joan Pillar, who is an attorney. Today, we're going to be looking at inheritance. Inheritance is one of issues that many families do not understand, or even when people create a family, it's conversations they never ever have, before they say I do. And oftentimes, families are in turmoil, as a result of inheritance. So today we call in a legal brain to help us explore inheritance. Hi, Lebu.
Hello, Bonolo. How are you?
I'm good, ma'am. How are you?
I'm well. I'm
awesome.
audible.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for taking your time to come here and share your brains with us. We don't take this for granted. We know you are an attorney. We know you have a law firm. We know such services are paid for. So for you to come through today, it's such an honor, and we are very much thankful.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. So, Lebo, I never ever want to assume that people know, the words that we throw around, the things that we say, we talk about. So I would like for you to just, define inheritance for us before we go on to look at the issues that come through, issues that we want to tackle today surrounding inheritance. What is inheritance?
Okay. Inheritance in our day-to-day loose understanding would mean something that is given to you upon the death of either a parent, a spouse, a sibling, or any other person who would like to make a donation to you upon death. That is what is called inheritance. However, there are those people who, prior to their death, distribute their estates as they deem fit. So it can happen before death or after death. But basically, it is just something that is given to you by another person. That is the most basic understanding of what inheritance is.
Awesome. Let me take time to just welcome our viewers. I see we have people already joining in. Thank you so much for connecting. Please go into the comment section and tag someone, share, or whatever you have to do to bring someone else. Please do so, your family and friends. This is a very important conversation. I know for sure that they would appreciate to be here. So do tag someone, and also let us know where you are joining us from. Always want to know where you're joining us from. Awesome. So Lebo, we see fights over inheritance. Mm-hmm. Before we go deep into the legal side of things, you have that experience. I mean, you work with the courts on a daily basis. You work with families on a daily basis. Why do we have people fight over inheritance?
The reasons for the fights are varied, but the most dominating one is one party feeling cheated by the other party, unfair treatment, or where, if it's a will, where people feel that there was some fraudulent conduct at the time that the will was concluded, or that at the time that the person who was making the will might not have been, especially if it's an elder, might not have been of sound mind, and therefore was incompetent to have made that will. So these are the main issues. You feel hard done because you've been excluded, or you've not been given a share that you thought you would be given. And if it's an interstate where somebody feels that a sibling didn't contribute to the estate, to the accumulation of the estate, and therefore not entitled to inherit. and fraud. Yes, if I could just narrow it down to that.
Right. And so I understand we operate under, common law and customary law. So can you
Yes.
briefly just share the difference in, estate management under common law and under customary law, if you can, so that from here we can then look at a typical family, take some scenarios where you then maybe help us really see how inheritance would be divided in the different family setups.
So customary law would basically mean the law that governs the different tribes that we have in Botswana, whether it is Herero, Kalanga, Batalaote. So you look at your culture and say, culturally, how do we devolve the estate of a deceased person? And then under common law, we borrow it from what we call the Roman Dutch law, which is our civil law. So we then look at the civil law and say, under civil law, how do we distribute this estate in the event that the person died intestate? Or even if the person died testate, but how do we, and there's a dispute, how do we resolve this particular dispute?
Awesome. So we see different family setups in our country. The Botswana family has totally changed. We're used to a nuclear family. We're used to an extended family. Now we have blended families. We have different types of families. I can go on and on. I'm just stating the three which are the most common, but I know that a whole lot of other setups out. So let's look at inheritance now in a family where it's a husband and a wife. One passes away, the other is there. And then a husband, a wife, and children. Number three, a husband, a wife, children from the father. The father had children before this marriage. The mother also had children before this marriage. That's number four. Number five, mother, father, children, biological children, and adopted children. So the different setups, how would then would they manage inheritance to avoid a whole lot of disputes?
So let's just go back, Bonolo, because I think I missed some of the categories. So I got husband and wife, wife, and children. Husband, wife, children, and children from previous relationships.
Yes.
And then?
And then husband, wife, children, and adopted children.
Okay. All right. I think the starting point is to plan, to carry out some form of estate management, right? And the most common way of doing that, it is by settling a will. So in terms of this will, you will first of all identify who your heirs are, what it is that you're leaving to them specifically, and who the executor or executrix of the estate would be. This would mean that the person who then winds up the estate and sees to it that it is given to the selected heirs. This is one of the easiest and most reasonable way of trying to deal with your estate whilst you're still alive. So you can conclude this will, and once you've concluded it, you deposit it with the master of the High Court, whether in Branchtown, in Gaborone, or in Lobatse. And now we have another one in Mount, so you can go and file it there for record keeping. Yeah. So If you're married and you're married in community of property, in terms of the will, you'll only be entitled to deal with your half share of the estate. So if your estate is, say, valued at 10 pula, you will deal with the 5 pula, because the other 5 pula then belongs to the surviving spouse. And then
okay, so the 50%, it's automatic that it belongs to the remaining spouse.
Your surviving spouse, yes.
Yeah.
So in terms of the will, it is not, you're not obliged to just look at your children or your spouse. You can look at charitable organizations that you supported when you're still alive, children that you cared for whilst you were still alive, your extended family, whether if you still have surviving parents, you can include them in your will. So you will include all of that. And if your children are still minors, you can even state who your selected guardian of the children would be upon your demise, should you pass away before they reach the age of majority. So all of this, it's meant to ensure that upon your death, your family does not have to deal with unnecessary trauma that arises from disputes and conflicts that are caused by intestate succession, where everybody comes in and claims that my brother took care of me and therefore I'm entitled to a share of his estate, and as his mother I'm also entitled, or as his father, or as this and that and that. We will respect the fact that whilst you were still of sound mind, you made the choice to say, these are the people that I want to inherit or benefit from my hard work whilst I was still alive. So this would cover all the scenarios of the types of families that you had given. Now, with adopted children, the other peculiarity is that adopted children are not precluded from inheriting from their biological parents by virtue of adoption. So even if I adopt you, when your biological mother passes away, then you're entitled to inherit from her as well.
Did you say they also inherit from
the biological parents? Yes.
From the biological parents.
Yes.
All right. I want to take you back a bit. You mentioned that you are allowed to look at other organizations you could give in your will. Is it allowed that if I decide to give away everything I have to charitable organizations and none to my own children, what does the law say about that? Is that allowed?
The law will concern itself, first of all, if at the time that you are deposed into your will, were you of sound mind, right? So normally a will is concluded before an attorney who will then need to satisfy themselves that when Bonolo came to consult, Bonolo was of sound mind. You also look at issues of reasonableness. So you can't do that if your children are minors, for example, because obviously they need to be taken care of up to a stage where they are now able to take care of themselves. But if, for example, your children are adults, and that is what you decide to do, and you are of sound mind, then your will is considered to be valid. You're allowed, because it is, remember, it is your property. So basically what you're doing with your will is simply saying, when I no longer have a voice for myself, I would like for this piece of document to speak on my behalf, and this is how I wish for my estate to be devolved.
Yeah. Awesome. So I'm thinking about a scenario where a couple divorced and had children. One marries in community of property to another woman who has a child, and they have a child with this man. What happens if this man passes away? Do the children from the previous marriage inherit or not?
Okay. Upon divorce, right? your estate is divided between the spouses, right? So
Right.
the ex-wife takes what is hers, the ex-husband takes what is hers, and then everybody moves on with their lives. But what is not terminated is your obligation towards your children. So if your children with your ex-wife were still minors, then they would be entitled to maintenance by the parent that is not the custodial parent. Now, if this person then dies, they are also entitled to inherit, because remember, at the dissolution of the marriage, the beneficiaries were just the spouses, and it had nothing to do with the children. So the divorce does not cut off your inherent right to inherit from your parents. Now, what could happen? The question that then arises is, when my father or my mother moved on and married person X, did they marry in community of property? Are they married out of community of property? Have they concluded a will? Is there a valid will in existence? And if so, what is the provision of that particular will? Does the will include us, or do the will excludes us? So these are then the issues that you start looking at. But basically, by virtue of a divorce does not mean that a child cannot inherit from either parent's estate upon their death.
Right. I wonder how many people know this. I wonder how many people really, consult people like yourselves before they get into marriage, especially when they have children or from previous marriages. But anyway, we'll take a quick break. We'll be back just now.
Life Skills Academy is an institution that offers coaching programs for children of ages 6 to 16 years. Now, there are life skills a child should learn by the age of 8 years. If not, the child may struggle as a teenager or adult. So give your child a lifetime gift by enrolling them for emotional intelligence, financial intelligence, and other life skills needed in the 21st century. For more information, call us on 7162-9362 or visit our Facebook page, Life Skills Academy.
Right, welcome back, and thank you so much for joining us. I see we are getting more people joining the conversation here. Thank you so much. Put down your questions, put down your concerns down there. I'm joined by Lebogang Joan Pillar, who is an attorney, helping us understand this issue of inheritance. And Lebo, we've looked at quite a number of situations with marriage in community of property, out of community of property. I think you touched on that one. But I want to read a question here. Why should people fight for inheritance in the first place? People should work for themselves. Well, I had this conversation on air on Sunday, and somebody said, and I don't care about inheritance. I work for myself. I have my own stuff. And then another listener called in and said, you know what? Wait until the parents pass on. He'll be the first person to want to claim his inheritance.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. And then Keromu Dita here welcomes saying a hot topic. Yeah, hot topic. So I was saying, Joan, I really wonder how many people understand, especially this one that we discussed just before we took a break, that you marry this man. He was married before. You marry in community of property. Do you understand that whatever assets you accumulate, his children from the previous marriage will also inherit from that? Do you think couples do talk about this? Do you think people understand this?
I think for the longest of time, we've always feared talking about inheritance, because basically it would also involve you talking about your own death. Right?
Yeah.
So more often than not, when you bring up the topic, it's as if I'm looking for the Sona phrase, but basically to me that, are you jinxing me? Are you wishing for me to die? you know. So that has sort of curtailed the conversation around estate planning. However, I think with the more I would like to say sophisticated that we are getting more and more exposed, and we are getting people making more inquiries about drafting wills and concluding wills, and basically just how to go about planning their own estate, so as to avoid these type of conflicts and ensure that whoever it is that was dear to them in their lives is also taken care of beyond their lives.
Right. So let's talk about now people married out of community of property. What happens there? How is it different from the other side? Just show us that that difference.
I suppose in this instance, it would mean that the party, one spouse dies without a will, right? Mm-hmm. So in that instance, the surviving spouse is the heir apparent, if there's nobody else. So it always goes back to, were you married? Yes, then your surviving spouse. Did you have children? Then it would be surviving spouse and children. And then every other person would then have to prove whether or not they were dependent on you, or how are they entitled to inherit from you. So the difference is that in this instance, yes, that's basically just it, that we are no longer dealing with the, remember, we said in the marriage and community of property, you're only entitled to deal with 50% of your 50% of the value of the estate, right? Now, where you're married out of community of property, you deal with it 100% because it is yours. So you can dispose of it as you please. Now, if you die without a will, that is when we then look at, because we need to identify heirs, and the starting point of an heir would basically be spouse, children, before we go out to the greater family and extended family.
Right. But the question is, do Botswana families, do they draft their wills? Do they have wills?
They do, yes. We have a sizable population that actually does draft their will. I think we associate wills more with riches or wealth. So we sort of say, oh, if you're wealthy and then you have something to leave behind for your children, that is when it's necessary for you to do your will. But the will, like I was saying earlier on, it covers a varied variety of things. For example, how would you like for you to be buried, right? Do you want to be cremated, or do you want to be buried the traditional way by being dug up 6 feet underground? Where would you like to be buried? How would you like your service to be conducted? Were you religious, non-religious? Are you opposed to being taken to church upon your death, etc.? So those are things that you consider in the will. And then also children, that especially if you're a single parent, upon my death, who would I like to become the primary custodian or guardian of my minor children? So it's not just about wealth. It looks at so many, or at a full 360-degree aspect of our lives, the way that it is right now.
Right. Let me quickly look at the messages coming in here, right? No saying nakana gets hababoswa ibile ha bulwelwa hone. All right. Welcome, Delik. Welcome, Neo. Thank you so much for joining. Right. So, is there a will under customary law?
In Setswana, people like saying, Musuna, ona ikila bua gore o batla senane senane. I get verbal, right? And then ba bangwe actually take it a step closer and draw it up and basically causing to sign off. That is also considered a will. So even if you don't have money to consult the lawyer and come to town to High Court, but just that piece of paper where you've stated, this is what I would like to happen, and then sign it.
Right. I want us to go back to issue of adopted children. Oftentimes people say they adopted children simply because at the time they got married, they said, you see that
Yes.
thing, yes, so money like that, and there was no paperwork filed with the courts to legalize adoption. What happens in managing your estate upon the passing of the parents?
A biological child of one of the spouses.
Yes.
Then they will be covered. The difficulty adoption becomes where neither adoptive parent was actually your biological parent. But in a cultural setup, and you die intestate, and your estate is dissolved culturally, they would recognize that money as a formal way of adopting a child, especially in cultures where I think that there's some cattle that are paid as a sign of you legitimizing that adoption, young one.
Yeah.
Culturally. So if you have proof that all those steps were carried, then that is culturally recognized.
Right. There's always yeah, okay. I was about to say there's always a problem between customary law and common law, where people will have made agreements under customary law, and then when there are fights, they then want to now use the courts of law. If it was done under customary law, what happens now in the courts where you use the Roman Dutch law? What happens? I mean, it was legal under customary law, but then they couldn't resolve the issues. They now have to cross over to now seek help from common law.
No, it is customary law is recognized, so you can even have your case being determined at the High Court, but still under customary law, where you call in your customary law experts who come and say, this is how Sekgada operates, or Sengwaketsi operates, or this particular culture, you operate that in this particular manner. So they will take that into consideration. So it's not as if our courts exclude customary law, right? So if that is the genesis of the matter, then they will look at it through the lens of the customary law and make the final determination still based on customary law.
All right. And then there was an incident where someone I know just saw in the newspapers that interested creditors and debtors of her late husband, are invited for a meeting with the master of court. She was there. She had never ever registered any case whatsoever. How is it possible that someone will go and register some case or maybe even query estate when I'm not aware? How is that possible?
An estate can be registered by a next of kin, right? Or a person with a vested interest. So your next of kin, if you're married, you're looking at your spouse or your children, right? Or a brother or a sister, a mother, a father. And then it also includes interested party, meaning any other person who they deem themselves as a likely heir or also as a creditor or a debt to the estate. So those people can also register the deceased estate with the master. It's only that you would expect that it would have been something that is spoken about within the family to say, let us go to the master's office and have this estate registered and follow the liquidation of the estate process through the High Court process.
Right. Right. We take a quick break. We'll be back with Lebogang's, final words.
Life Skills Academy is an institution that offers coaching programs for children of ages 6 to 16 years. Now, there are life skills a child should learn by the age of 8 years. If not, the child may struggle as a teenager or adult. So give your child a lifetime gift by enrolling them for emotional intelligence, financial intelligence, and other life skills needed in the 21st century. For more information, call us on 7162-9362 or visit our Facebook page, Life Skills Academy.
Right, welcome back, and thank you for staying here up until this time. Yeah, somebody was saying here, topic but thanks for the discussion. Yeah, we need to talk about these things. I mean, we see families drift apart, just from simple things as inheritance, things that could be talked about and is always a solution to. Lebo, just maybe as we round up, what advice would you give maybe to people who are who wants to get married, two people who are married, never ever discussed inheritance, two people with children and children from previous marriages? Just your word of advice to the different people who might be affected by issues of inheritance in future.
I think the starting point is communication, and we need to openly, whether you're planning on getting married, you're already married, you have a blended family, you have adopted children, you have elderly parents who are dependent on you, or you have siblings who are dependent on you. In an African context, we have all these, I call it a colorful life, because you have all these people who rely on you for this and that, and who, without your assistance, their lives will probably be worse off than they already are right now. So these are things that we need to talk about with our partners, our spouses, and just be open and honest about it, to say, as Lebogang, I'm taking care of my mother, my father, X, Y, Z, even when I die, if I die before they do, I would like to continue taking care of them. And that will also bring up another conversation, taking that into consideration. Do we then get married in commute of property or out of commute of property? Or how do we go about to taking care of all these other responsibilities that we have on the sides, right? And then also, where you have children involved from previous relationships, you need to have an open conversation with your current children and your children from previous relationships, to simply say, you're aware that we have sibling X, Y, Z, right? And that is just how our family is. And even when I pass away, I still need to provide equally for your sibling at that other side as I do for you, But all in all, I think the most important thing is to document your intentions, to document your wishes, and ensure that you have a will. And then just regularly update your will as and when certain things happen in your life, when you acquire new property, when the person that you had appointed as your heir passes away, or the person that you had identified as your children's guardian passes away. Regularly update it, to just make sure that, to try and minimize sources of conflict upon your death. and make the transition of you being alive to you being dead much easier and less cumbersome for your family.
Right. Awesome. You know, something just came through for me here. I'm thinking about a child who born out of wedlock, born to this, and you know, was never ever introduced at all. But you know how children would definitely look for their fathers until they find them.
Yes.
A child like that, how would he or she be treated if she or he surfaces maybe later in life after the
It
father
depends
passed
on
on?
whether the child, it will depend on whether or not the child is a minor. So if the child is still a minor, the child will be entitled to inherit, to claim maintenance. No, not inherit per se, but to claim maintenance up until the age of majority or they become self-sufficient. Now, in terms of in inheritance, because you're out of wedlock, that has not really been recognized, unless if there were processes to then bring you into the family and adopt you or remedy, whether culturally or through Roman Dutch law.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lebo. I don't see any questions here, just comments to say it's an interesting topic. Yeah, and so I believe we can round it up here. Thank you so much, ma'am, for taking your time to edify us in this manner.
Thank you so much, Bonolo, for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Good evening. Right. Yeah, we come to the end of this discussion today. Thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, like I said, these are issues that we see really causing a lot of tension in families. And it was very, very important for us to look at it with you know, a legal brain to actually help us you know, understand some of these things. And I know that you know, people most times they would never ever touch on issues of inheritance at a point where they are creating a family. And after marriage, then you know, it's like, okay, so now what do we do? So I hope to also look at, you know, before I do, maybe a session that I'll call before I say I do, just to look at, you know, what exactly you need to discuss as a couple before you commit into marriage. Thank you so much. Do stay connected. We are also live on YouTube channel. Our name is Bonolo Speaks, and on Periscope as well, Bonolo Speaks. And on Thursdays, we do have, you know, transforming stories from people that we get so much inspiration from. And this Thursday, I'm hosting Nuno Ramhodzi, who is a jazz artist right here in Botswana, too, who is also recently appointed as one of the judges at Zajalo, My African Dream. So you want to be inspired by such a creative. So thank you so much. Stay connected. Do continue, you know, putting your questions or comments down there. I'll surely pass them to Lebo, and she's also available for another 1 hour to respond to whatever that may come even after this live session. Thank you so much. Good evening. And I want to remind you that nothing just happens. Go out and do whatever you need to do to achieve whatever you want to achieve. Good evening.